The Cold War was a time of intense suspicion. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a silent, shadowy battle for global dominance. This wasn't just a competition of armies and weapons, it was a race for intelligence and technological supremacy. Every secret held immense power. Every advantage, no matter how strange, was worth exploring. American intelligence agencies worried constantly about a psychic gap. They heard whispers and read reports suggesting that the Soviets were pouring money into parapsychology research. They feared that the USSR might be developing psychic spies who could read minds, influence thoughts, or even cause harm from a distance. The idea was unsettling, but in the high-stakes game of espionage, no possibility could be ignored. This fear created a unique and urgent pressure within the CIA. If the Soviets were weaponizing the mind itself, America could not afford to be left behind. The prevailing logic was that even if the chances of success were slim, the potential threat was too great to dismiss. The agency began to ask a radical question. Could the human mind be a tool for intelligence gathering? Could a person, sitting in a quiet room in California, see what was happening inside a secret military base deep within the Soviet Union? This question was the seed from which one of the most bizarre and controversial programs in U.S. intelligence history would grow, a program that would blur the lines between science and science fiction. The atmosphere of the 1970s was ripe for such an experiment. The counterculture movement had opened minds to alternative ideas, while serious scientific institutions were also beginning to explore the fringes of human consciousness. The fear of Soviet psychic research provided the perfect justification for the CIA to fund its own exploration into these uncharted territories. They needed scientists willing to take on this unconventional challenge, researchers who could apply rigorous methods to a subject that many in the mainstream scientific community considered pure fantasy. The search for these pioneers led the agency to a prestigious research institute on the West Coast, where a small group was already asking similar questions. The goal was clear, yet incredibly ambitious. The CIA wanted to develop a reliable method for remote viewing, a term coined to describe the alleged ability to acquire information about a distant or unseen target using only the mind. This wasn't just about curiosity, it was about national security. If successful, psychic spies could provide intelligence that was impossible to obtain through traditional means like satellites or human agents on the ground. They could potentially locate hidden weapon sites, find hostages, or track enemy movements without ever leaving the United States. The stakes were enormous, and the agency was ready to invest in this extraordinary gamble. The CIA found its scientific partners at the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, in Menlo Park, California. Two laser physicists, Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, were at the forefront of this effort. They were respected scientists who had become fascinated by the potential of human consciousness. In the early 1970s, they began conducting experiments that aimed to prove the existence of psychic abilities under controlled laboratory conditions. When the CIA learned of their work, it saw an opportunity. The agency provided secret funding, and what began as academic curiosity soon transformed into a top-secret intelligence program, eventually known by code names like Skinate and, most famously, Stargate. The experiments were designed to be as scientific as possible. A typical remote viewing session involved a viewer being isolated in a sealed, windowless room. Sometimes this room was a Faraday cage, a metal-screened enclosure designed to block all electromagnetic signals, ensuring that no conventional information could leak in. Meanwhile, an outbounder team would be sent to a randomly selected target location somewhere in the local area. The target could be anything from a public park to a specific building or a unique landmark. The viewer's task was to describe what the outbounder team was seeing, using only their mind. Their impressions were often a jumble of sensory data, shapes, sounds, colors, and feelings. The viewers would sketch or write down everything that came to their minds. These raw descriptions were then given to independent judges. The judges would be provided with a list of all the possible target locations for that day, including the correct one. Their job was to visit each location and decide which one best matched the viewer's description. If the judge correctly matched the transcript to the target site, it was considered a hit. Targ and Puthoff believed that by repeating this process over and over, they could collect statistical data that proved remote viewing was a genuine phenomenon, one that worked more often than random chance would allow. Over the years, the program tested dozens of individuals, but a few stood out for their supposed talents. Pat Price, a former police commissioner, was one of the early stars. He produced remarkably detailed and accurate descriptions of target sites, sometimes including specific information that seemed impossible to guess. Another key subject was Rosemary Smith, an artist whose sketches of target locations were often strikingly similar to the actual places. These early successes were incredibly encouraging for the CIA and the SRI researchers. They suggested that remote viewing was not just a statistical anomaly, but a trainable skill that could be honed and used for practical intelligence purposes. As the program developed, the CIA began to use its psychic spies for real-world intelligence missions. The targets were no longer local parks, but sensitive foreign sites of great interest to national security. One of the most famous alleged successes involved Pat Price. In 1974, he was asked to remote view a secret Soviet facility at Semipalatinsk. Price described and sketched a massive, gantry-like crane moving over a large sphere inside a building. His detailed drawing was so compelling because it closely matched satellite imagery of a suspected nuclear research site that the intelligence community was trying to understand. This apparent hit convinced many within the agency that the program had immense operational value. Another notable case involved Rosemary Smith, who was tasked with locating a downed Soviet bomber that had crashed somewhere in Africa. At the time, US satellites had been unable to find the wreckage. Smith, working from the SRI lab, provided geographic coordinates and descriptions of the crash site. While her information was not perfectly precise, it was reportedly close enough to help intelligence analysts narrow their search area, eventually leading to the discovery of the plane. These instances were held up as powerful evidence that remote viewing could produce actionable intelligence, providing clues that were unavailable through any other source. These successes kept the program funded and alive for nearly 2 decades. However, the program's record was far from perfect. For every stunning success, there were many failures and ambiguous results. One of the most significant failures occurred during the Iran hostage crisis in 1979. The CIA tasked its remote viewers with locating the American hostages being held in Tehran. The psychics provided a variety of locations, but none of their information proved accurate or useful. When a military rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw, was launched, it ended in disaster. And it was clear that the intelligence from the remote viewers had not helped. This high-profile failure cast a long shadow over the program and raised serious doubts about its reliability in critical, time-sensitive situations. The challenge was that the information from remote viewers was often vague, symbolic, or mixed with incorrect details. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle with missing and extra pieces. A viewer might correctly describe the shape of a building but get its location completely wrong. They might sense a feeling of water near a target, but be unable to tell if it was a river, a lake, or a swimming pool. This inconsistency made it incredibly difficult for intelligence analysts to trust the data. They couldn't be sure if a psychic's impression was a genuine insight or just a lucky guess. The program was caught in a frustrating cycle of tantalizing successes and baffling failures. By the mid-1990s, after 2 decades of secret funding, the CIA decided it was time for a final independent evaluation of Project Stargate. The agency commissioned the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, to conduct a thorough review of the program and its results. The AIR report, delivered in 1995, was highly critical. It concluded that there was no convincing evidence that remote viewing had ever provided valuable intelligence for any US government operation. The report pointed to major flaws in the experimental design, such as the possibility of sensory leakage, where subtle clues could have been unintentionally given to the viewers, and judging bias, where judges might have been too eager to find a match. The AIR report also included evaluations from 2 prominent academics who came to very different conclusions. Jessica Utz, a statistics professor at the University of California, Davis, argued that the statistical results were far too strong to be dismissed as mere chance. She believed the data showed a real, albeit small, psychic effect. On the other side was Ray Hyman, a psychologist and noted skeptic. Hyman agreed that the statistical results were interesting, but he argued that they were not enough. He contended that without a plausible theory to explain how remote viewing could work, and without perfectly controlled experiments that ruled out every other possibility, the phenomenon could not be considered proven. This fundamental disagreement between Utz and Hyman perfectly captured the debate that surrounded the program for its entire existence. Was remote viewing a genuine, unexplained human ability? Or was it a product of flawed experiments and wishful thinking? Following the AIR report's largely negative assessment, the CIA terminated Project Stargate in 1995 and declassified most of its records. The official conclusion was that the program was not worth further investment. The psychic spy program, which had begun with such high hopes during the Cold War, was officially over. The doors to the lab at SRI were closed for good. Despite its official end, the legacy of Project Stargate endures. The story continues to fascinate the public, inspiring books, documentaries, and movies. For believers, it is proof that the government knows more about psychic phenomena than it lets on. For skeptics, it is a cautionary tale about how even a sophisticated intelligence agency can be drawn into pseudoscience. Interestingly, even the critical AIR report offered a final, intriguing recommendation. It stated that future research should not focus on proving the existence of the phenomenon, but rather on understanding its mechanism. That single line leaves the door slightly ajar, a quiet admission that even after 20 years, the mystery of the mind's eye was never fully solved. If you found this deep dive into the CIA's secret psychic spy program thought-provoking, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more investigations into hidden history and controversial science. What do you think? Was remote viewing real science or Cold War pseudoscience? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. And ring that bell so you never miss an episode uncovering the secrets governments don't want you to know.